All right, so ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, Chief Economist of Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad. So Dr. Afzanizam has 20 years of experience in investment research, especially in field of economics and capital market. Previously, he had served in a number of investment institutions such as Khazanah Nasional Berhad, Retirement Fund Incorporated KWAP, and rating agencies Malaysian Rating Corporation Berhad, MARC, as an economist. His role in Bank Islam is to advise the bank on macroeconomic related issues such as fiscal and monetary policies that can affect the operating environment of various industries. He is also regular commentator in the media and as well as academic advisors for a number of local universities. Dr. Afzanizam holds a Doctor of Philosophy Economics and Master of Business Administration, Applied Finance and Investment from University Kebangsaan Malaysia UKM, as well as Bachelor of Business Administration, Finance and Diploma in Investment Analysis from UITM. So let's not waste any more time. So Dr. Afzanizam, the floor is now yours.
Okay, thank you, Kama, for the welcoming remarks. My name is Afzanizam. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for having me here today. In particular, in respect to the topic that I would like to share about, of course, as an economist, the common question that has been asked to me is, of course, what would the economy like post a pandemic? Especially now, we're already in the month of October. Very soon, inshallah, we will be hearing from the government next week on the budget 2022. So what will be in store for us next week? So I really hope that there will be more details that will be laid out by the government. It's in terms of their plans in coming up with perhaps good programs, good policies that would navigate us in these trying times. Of course, this topic, I really hope that I will try to shed more lights on how we shall, view about the current situation and how we should proceed throughout the year and perhaps 2022 and beyond. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, I think these are the common questions being asked. People have been saying about this new normal narratives. So what does it really mean? Does it mean that it's a total change in terms of how we do things, or is it going to be a quasi change in terms of how things will be proceeded, and perhaps or there will be a new tools that we were using in terms of how we should live in terms of our day-to-day lives. Obviously, we have yet to see the actual outcome, but as for now, I think what we can really see is that the proliferation of technology has really helped us a lot in terms of how we should navigate ourselves. And we can see, of course, while the technological advancement has been very, become sophisticated, but of course, because the nature of the economic shocks that we experienced last year and until now is something that is very, I would say, quite unprecedented, considering that the previous time that we have ever had this such scale in terms of pandemic, it was way back in 1918 when the global or the entire population that time was experiencing the Spanish flu. Even it was well documented in Malaya back then. I think we suffered total casualties to the tune, 30,000 people were perished during that time. So I think it's only fair to view the current predicaments in the lens that we are, to some degree, is very unprecedented, and therefore the way the government has reacted is also quite unprecedented. So moving on from this point, what would it means in terms of the economy? I think there are key lessons that we can learn from the previous episode. Obviously, as an economist, I think one of the most important or valuable lessons that we can learn from this pandemic is that there exists of the economic cycle. If you look at if you look in the past GDP contraction, in a way we can conclude that there seems to be a contraction or a recession, which typically would happen in every 10 years. In every decade, there will be one period of GDP contractions. So true enough, it happened last year. The economy globally actually fell into recession, and of course, Malaysia also succumbed to that pressure. The country in Malaysia, of course, we are, in terms of GDP performance, the country recorded a 5.6% contraction in terms of GDP, the gross domestic product. And prior to last year recession, we experienced a similar kind of recession during 2009, 1998, and 1985. So judging from these data points, what we can learn is that there seems to be 1 year that would actually result in economic recession. But of course, while we acknowledge there seems to be a 10-year cycle, of course, the root cause of the problems will be unknown. I mean, for me, as an economist, of course, we always look at the figures. We constantly look at the signs. We kind of agree that there will be a recession. And for me, in my case, I've spotted the signs that the recession is actually looming way back in 2018. There are, of course, I was using a few numbers of indicators, but back then, of course, hardly any visible signs that the recession, the main cause of recession would be coming from the the virus. Back then, I always thought that it could be because of the trade war between the US and China. But of course, during the late 2019, in December, the COVID-19 was discovered in Wuhan, China. Then the situation seems to be snowballed from that point. So until now, we are still experiencing the shocks from the COVID-19. So while we can agree on this trends, so we can only guess what would be the future shocks, what will be the future catalysts for in terms of the next round of recession. So it appears that geopolitics, geopolitics, US versus China, climate change, surging inflation could be one of the potential candidates that could result in recessions economic. So I think one of the valuable lessons is to learn from the economic cycle. Then we look at the sources of household income. We always look at what will be the GDP growth like, given that the kind of policy responses adopted by the government. But I think it would be beneficial for us to understand the nature, or rather the profile of household income, especially in Malaysia. So these are a survey done the Department of Statistics Malaysia through the reports called Household Income and Basic Amenities. So we can see that the share of average household income, of course, it is dominated by paid employment, which is salaries and wages. But you can see that the contribution from paid employment to total household income has actually dwindled over time. From 2012, it was like 2/3. Now it's hovering around 57.7%. However, other forms of income, such as self-employed, for instance, we have seen a remarkable increase compared to 2016. It was just 15.6% in 2016. Now it is currently hovering around 17.4%. So what it means is that while we are focusing on jobs quality, the kind of salary that is commensurate with the level of education, but at the same time, we can see the spirits of entrepreneurship have become so dominant, have become so prevalent. So I think this is the areas whereby the country has need to focus on, and that is why, if you notice, the government has been focusing on the MSME, the micro, small, and medium enterprises, as a means to elevate our state of economy. So there are a lot of programs that is directed towards promoting MSME, which is very aligned with the self-employed kind of income stream. So aside from self-employed, we could also see properties and investment. So we can see that the contribution from properties and investment has actually increasing from 9.7% in 2012, now it's about 14.5% as of last year. So what it means is that financial literacy is also important in terms of how we should navigate ourselves. Of course, when we look at the pandemic shocks, one of the key responses is moratorium, loans moratoriums, and of course withdrawal of EPF contributions, or rather withdrawal of EPF savings. So while these measures are imperatives, but it also kind of tell you that the level of financial literacy among our society is still low. So this is where I think financial literacy really comes into the picture in terms of helping us to navigate the future. At the moment, we can see that the trend is quite forthcoming. And I myself, when I look at in the social media platform, I can see, the number of stock market guru has actually blooming. Well, this could be debatable, but I think what we need is that a holistic way of looking at things. But I must say that the emergence of the stock market growth, I tend to look at it from a positive angle. At least our society is trying their level best to understand this risky investment. At least they are trying their best to ensure that their savings can grow. But of course, this needs to be done in a very careful manner, because direct investing in the stock market can be very risky. So that's properties and investment. And if you look at the current transfer received, this is your Bantuan Prihatin Nasional, Bantuan Prihatin Rakyat, and everything. Basically, the cash transfers from the government, especially for the M40 and the B40. While this this income stream has gained prominence, it is good in terms of managing the individual's economy in the short term. But I think we also need to think about the future in terms of how this M40, the B40 could actually elevate themselves so that they will be less reliant from the government assistance. So this is where I think areas like entrepreneurship really plays an important role in terms of promoting a more vibrant economy. So from this, I think we can learn that while we are focusing on income, while we are focusing on salaries and wages, but in actual fact, there are other means of income stream that can help our Malaysian folks to earn more income. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay, that's on the contribution, or rather the income profile among our households. And when we talk about income, we always talk about whether we realize or otherwise, we always talk about the nominal income, which is an income which has not yet being adjusted to the level of inflation. So this is a data from, again, from the Department of Statistics of Malaysia. Okay, there's a question on the paid employment. Has it actually? Well, I think in terms of level, okay, from this slide, we can deduce from this slide in terms of how the income has actually been trending last year. So it has actually coming down from 2,442 ringgit for median salaries in 2019. It went down to from 2,800, yeah, to about 2,062 ringgit. So it means, what it means is that the nominal income really being affected by the COVID-19. But of course, when we adjusted to inflation, it's actually, or effectively, you are earning about 1,700 ringgit. So there is a almost 300 ringgit loss in terms of purchasing power. So the point that I want to make is that while we are, of course, we would like to see our income will continue to grow, but we need to understand that there is a great differences between nominal and real income. Nominal is what you really see, what you really be getting in terms of paychecks, but the real income is what you actually can be able to purchase, your ability to buy goods and services, you know. So so in terms of policy making, while the government is putting more emphasis on income growth, but at the same time they also need to look at how general prices is being administered. So this is where your subsidies, your price ceiling comes into play. But in actual fact, I think, of course, these are debatable and still an ongoing debate. I think it is best to allow the market mechanism to determine the level of equilibrium prices. This may sound a little bit of a textbook, but I think given that policies relating to subsidies, policies related to price control, while it has been there for a number of decades, I think the success rate in terms of managing prices, I think we have yet to see that really happening in the way that we desire. So I think it requires us to really to look at these things in a different lens. So I think it is high time for us to understand that while we want to continue to experience higher income, but we need to understand that the more important thing is the ability to purchase, your purchasing power, which means that prices has to be allowed to move in accordance to the market forces. So of course, the next question, how we can do this, you know, apparently it's not easy, but I think the regulation relating to anti-monopolistic situation under a certain acts really helpful in managing this, and also I think we need to ensure that, you know, there are bad practices will be avoided, you know, or rather eradicated, like, you know, price manipulation, hoarding, or any malpractices in relation to trade, in relation to business should be avoided in totality. And also to some, not to some, I think to a large degree, corruption practices has to be avoided, has to be eradicated totally, because there are literature that says that there is a close association between corruptions and inflation, because corruption can lead inflation. So these are the things that should be the main focus rather than to control prices per se. So I think with this, I hope it could really opens up our mind that while we aspire to in getting more income, but we need to understand that real income is what really matters at the end of the day. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, same message. The message from this slide is actually prices tend to go up, and prices are sticky downward. Once they go up, it's difficult for them to come down. And this is a very clear indication from the new Keynesian economics approach. So it is being reflected in the number, in the statistics. This is essentially the consumer price index, which is the an aggregated measures of prices in the economy. You have your food and beverages, you have your utilities, you have your transport, you have your healthcare charges and whatnot. Everything will be aggregated into this one indicator called consumer price index. So from this charts, you can see that it tends to go up over time. And true enough, when I look at the rate of inflation, meaning the rate of price increases over time, from 1985 up until 2020, on average, inflation is rising at a rate of 2.4% per annum. So what it means is that every year we tend to lose out in terms of our purchasing power by 2.4%. So this is the reality, but it's a necessity reality, because higher prices means that businesses are making profits. When there are profits, there will be more incentive for businesses to hire more laborers. That's a general way of looking at things. But at the same time, we wouldn't want prices to go up disproportionately, go up, in a manner that is becoming detrimental to our society. So again, it's a role of the government to ensure that prices will continue to be harmony in terms of its impact to the economy. So again, what I'm trying to say here is that prices are very important, but is very difficult to control. Okay, that's on prices. So what about interest rate? It's also a form of prices, which is the price of money. Here is actually the interest rates in the bond market. Why I use this as an indicators? Because bond yields tend to move almost every day. So it's a reflection of a supply and demand dynamics in the fixed income market, in the bond market. So it's a true reflections of how interest rates should behave. So we can see in the US, in UK, even in Malaysia, the trend of interest rate tend to go down over time. And there are a number of explanations why this phenomenon happens. And one of the key areas is actually our demographic profile has become more aging, and therefore we have a lot of retirees, and therefore there's a lot of savings in the system. This savings has actually suppressed the level of interest rates. So that's one of the explanations. There are many explanations actually. So but the key point from here is that when it comes to inflation, we understand that it's going to affect our purchasing power. So inevitably, what we need to do is we need to invest. We need to execute our investment plan so that we can ward off this inflationary pressure, so to speak. So what it means that we need to invest our funds, our savings, so that hopefully we are able to surpass, to exceed the level of inflation. But the challenge is that in terms of investments, there's always a balance between risk and returns, meaning we need to really understand our risk appetite. If you continue to remain risk averse, meaning we are scared to take more risk, and this is the situation, because usually bond markets can be deemed as especially for the government bond market, we can deem it as a risk-free rate. So I mean, imagine that if you put all our money in a risk-free assets, while it can yield certain returns, but I think the returns is quite suboptimal. And to a large degree, I think it may not be able to surpass the level of inflation rates. So therefore, I think while investment is more or less something that is required for us to do, but we need to understand our risk and return, our risk tolerance, and what are the suitable investment products that really suits us well in terms of our risk appetite. So these are the things that you need to understand before embarking any investment plan. So what the point that I want to make, we need to invest because interest rates are super low, and we will continue to do so for the remaining years ahead. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I've talked about the recovery. I've talked about the the inflation, the income profile among Malaysian households. I've talked about inflation. I've talked about interest rates. Now we talk about the new normals. Again, we go back to the earlier question on the new normal. What does it really mean? At least from how we do things, which I think can be relevant for architects. So this is a survey done by Ipsos, one of the consultants. It was reported last night in TV3. So I pick up the news flow and the relevant reports in relation to their studies. So apparently, we can see that this survey was done and was reported it was published on 1st October. So from the survey, it appears that about 1/3 of Malaysians are more comfortable to work from home, or rather working remotely. Again, about 32% also they prefer to work. Basically, what it means is that the new normal, what it means is that there will be less demand for offices, the way I see it, because it makes sense to some of us to be working remotely, because based on this study, based on this survey, it really helps in terms of improving the level of productivity. And from the employee standpoint, because the business landscape has been very challenging. Okay, okay, you may, all right. Because the changing environment in terms of the how we work, has changed, and how it can translate in terms of our bottom line, or the company's bottom line. I think it makes a business case for people to work from home. So, but I don't foresee that it will be in full force. It may take in a form that certain functions can only be applied in this environment. And even for Bank Islam, for me and my colleagues at risk management, I know my colleagues from audits, compliance division, they have been working from home. But my other colleagues, especially when dealing with clients, with dealing with customers, especially those at the branch, obviously they have to be present physically. So I think it's not a cookie cutter. Obviously, it will have to be dependent upon the types of work that you do, and how is actually what it means in terms of productivity. So what the point I want to make is that I think the demand for office spaces could change actually going forward in terms of the design, in terms of the space and whatnot. And can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is the overall occupancy rate purpose-built office. This is from NAPIC. So again, the trend has actually coming down. I mean, for across the states lah. So it kind of strengthened the points that I think working remotely, or rather a flexible working environment or flexible working arrangement, is something that we shouldn't be underestimating, because businesses, again, like I said, business landscape is very challenging. So typically businesses will find ways to reduce their costs, to be more competitive. If working remotely, working flexibly can really result in productivity gains, then and that would actually, such trend will actually continue to hold. So these are the actual data that we saw in terms of the office space. And to go back to our new normal narrative, this is something that we need to really look into, because the way I see it, it has an important implication in terms of infrastructure, and perhaps it could be a catalyst for the residential properties, especially at the outskirts or even the outside from the Klang Valley, because nowadays geographical location is not a major barrier for someone to secure a jobs in Klang Valley, for instance, because the proliferations of technology would allow people to work remotely and at the same time deliver good results for the company. So these are the trends that I foresee that may occur or actually can be sustained going forward. Okay, next slide, please. Come on. Okay, we talk about slightly more on the what the new normal would actually entails. So we look at the government situation. Can the government have more rooms to provide additional stimulus, be it from the central bank or rather the federal government level? So it appears that from the government standpoint, the federal government's debt level, you can see that the composition of their debt level mostly are in ringgit. 97% of them is actually denominated in ringgit, and therefore, for any ringgit denominated bonds, chances for the federal government to default is very, very low, because the government will always be able to refinance those debts. And the existence of major investors, institutional investors like EPF, Co-op, banks, insurance companies, or even the asset managers, they continue to have a very strong appetite towards federal government debts, because it is deemed a very risk-free instrument. And not to mention, appetite from the foreign investors are also quite forthcoming, because the share from foreign investors in Malaysian government securities, the MGS, which is the major instrument to be used by the government in terms of how they actually garner their borrowings, is actually amounting to about 40%, meaning 40% is owned by the foreigners, and then the balance 60% is owned by the local institution. This goes to show that how strong the appetite from the investors in respect to government debt. So what it means is that the government has the means to actually to issue more debts to finance their expenditure. But again, the main question to me, at least, is the questions of how these funds will be used, how effective are all the development expenditure programs, so the governance structure. So these are the key criteria actually that will determine the success of the fiscal policy. So I like to think when the government, recently the Ministry of Finance has issued the pre-budget 2022 statements. They've indicated that the Fiscal Responsibility Act will be tabled, and in this FRA Act, the aim is to ensure that the governance, in particular the governance, will be restored, and hopefully it will create more confidence in terms of the procurement and whatnot, in terms of how the government actually prescribe the fiscal policy. And we look at the overnight policy rates, which is monetary policy, essentially. So yes, OPR level is the lowest in history, 1.75%. But I think if there is a need be in terms of the intervention from the central bank to promote growth, I think there always be a room for the central bank to reduce the OPR. But at the moment, I think the case for lowering the OPR has diminished, because we have seen good signs in terms of economic recovery, especially when the interstate travel ban has been lifted, and we could see that the traffic volume has actually improved. So this could essentially would help to become, or rather to result in a more lively economic activities, which eventually would actually drive our GDP growth into a higher trajectory. So for now, the case for lowering the OPR is quite low. In terms of the reserve assets, now I think it's more than 111 billion US dollar. It's now currently hovering around 115 billion US dollar. And in terms of the number of months imports, the measure to see whether our reserve is actually adequate or otherwise, I think it's more than adequate. And therefore the central bank has always the means to stabilize the foreign exchange markets. And then in terms of current account balance, which is basically the difference in export and import, continue to report the surplus balance. So what it means is that there are still a lot of liquidity in the system. So what this charts, or rather this deck, try to show you is that the government, be it the federal or the central bank, has always the means to prescribe additional policies to support the economic growth. So we shall see what will be the measures will be announced in the budget 2022 next week on the 29th of October. Okay, next slide, please. I think we are going towards the end already. Come on, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, just very quick overview on the 12 nation plans. I think as in the past plans, always they will talk about the thematics, the policy trust, and I think the 12 Malaysian plans is no difference either. So of course, there will be 3 themes, resetting the economy, strategies. So you can all read these documents. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I think what the more important for us to understand is the targets, the macro targets. Of course, for the next 5 years, 2021 up until 2025, the growth target is 4.5% to 5.5%. This is very much higher from the actual performance during the 11 Malaysian plans, which is from 2016 to 2020 last year. So in the 11 Malaysian plans, the average growth stood at about 2.7%, but for 12 Malaysian plans, the growth rate is expected to be higher. And if you look at the development expenditure, number 5, the total allocation for development expenditure is actually the highest in history, 400 billion ringgit, as opposed to the previous plans, which is about 248.5 billion. So I think this is very quite critical in terms of promoting growth. And I think, as in the past, the key sectors that will benefit, obviously, the construction sector. When we talk about construction, there will be 2 types of construction, the residential properties and also the non-residential properties. So these 2, and also infrastructures, I think will be the big immediate beneficiaries in terms of the higher allocation for development expenditure. However, if you look at the number 4, the fiscal balance of GDP, which is the difference between the revenue and the expenditure. While the government is looking to record a deficit of 3.5% of GDP to 3% of GDP by year 2025, but if you to compare the current performance of our fiscal balance, which is about 7.7% of GDP in terms of fiscal deficit, so I think what it means is that there could be new, there could be new taxes that we announce from 2022 up until 2025, because in order for you to reduce your fiscal balance, there are always 2 ways. It's either you raise your revenue by way of raising your taxes, or you cut your expenditure. But given that development expenditure is already at all-time high, I think it's only natural to expect that the revenue, or rather the tax revenue, will be the main driver to reduce the budget gap. So at the moment, what we have been hearing is actually the windfall tax, the capital gain tax in stock markets. What else? Perhaps the reintroduction of GST. These are the nuances that we have been hearing. As for now, we have yet to see any concrete plans for that. But at least from this number, we know the government is really planning to reduce their budget gap. So that would mean that we should embrace for impact in terms of the new taxes. And in terms of unemployment rate, 4%, inflation at 2.7%. So the way I see it is that throughout the 5-year plan, while the economy is expected to grow at 4.5% to 5.5%, what it means is that the recovery will be fragile, will be so vulnerable, because I think the impact of the COVID-19 is very real. The scarring effect, in particular in the labor market, is very real. I mean, if you look at household income survey, we have seen even the T20 people are also being affected. Some of the T20 has actually migrated to M40 to the tune of 12.8% based on the total population. And some of the M40 has actually downgraded to B40 for about 20% of them. So for this group to go back to their, the pre-pandemic income level, I think will take a while. So I think these are the situation that there will be that we need to be cognizant in terms of how we should put our expectations in terms of the strength of the recovery. Okay, I think we should be on the final slide. Next slide, please. Come on. Okay, so my take on the economy, I think this is without, obviously the country has to be competitive. And we know that the COVID-19 is kind of a wake-up call for almost every one of us. So therefore, the focus should be on capacity building, which is to focus on education, healthcare, and the right infrastructure. When I say the right infrastructure, meaning to say that there could be less physical infrastructure, but perhaps there will be more infrastructure in relation to technology. So perhaps areas relating to 5G network will be the main focus. And of course, a fair opportunity. I think it should be a merit-based. I think we know that all segment of the society have been affected by the COVID-19. So it is only fair that this opportunity should be spread out almost in a fairly manner. And then the number two, of course, we need to distinguish between equality and equitable. So what we are trying to strive is actually about being fair and just. Again, it goes back to the first point actually, that the approach should be a merit based. And then we need to put the right mindset towards how should the government play their role. I think in the economy, government is only one part of the equation. They are merely a facilitator and enabler. The rest is really up to us how we should, take advantage of all of this initiative or incentives that could actually make us more beneficial. And then, of course, number four, digital economy will be key to protect against. And finally, obviously, 12 nation plans. I think it's a great plans, but I think execution is the key success factor. So I think that should wraps up my take on the topic. So I will be more than happy to take on any questions from the floor.
All right, thank you so much, Dato, for the insightful presentation. Now we are moving on with the Q&A session. So everyone's to all participants, if you have any questions you would like to ask to Doctor, kindly put your questions whether in the chat or Q&A so that I can read out the questions so that we can discuss on the questions together. All right, so let's just move on with the first question in the chat box. It's from Eng Fu Zin. Dear sir, paid employment has been reducing since 2012. Nothing to do with COVID. Poor employee like us. Why?
Well, I think the paid employment has actually declined. Yeah, you are right. To put it that way, it's not part of the pandemic, and that's why when I been asked about the question is that I think we really need to move away that, oh, the country has to create more jobs. Yeah, that's right. That's very true. But we need to understand that there are big corporations, there are small industries, right? But if you look at how the behavior of the large corporations, they have been focusing on technology because they have achieved the so-called the economy of scale. I mean, I just look at my employer at Bank Islam. Yes, the recruitment exercise still ongoing, but we are not in a hiring spree. It's very selective, and when we saw if there is resignation, typically we would just leave it there and we just make do whatever we have. So I like to think that this mentality is also quite prevalent because I think we have moved into technology. We have gone into digitalization of doing things. So it doesn't require too many labor. So if you are looking at large corporations to be the main source of job creations, I think we are missing the points. So that's why I think we need to really promote entrepreneurships as a means to create jobs. But again, focusing on entrepreneurs is different because I think entrepreneurs is a different breed. I'm not too sure what are the literature that says that, but my intuition says that entrepreneurs is different breed, and therefore education is very, very critical in promoting or creating this set of group of people, you know. But maybe we don't need so much entrepreneur. I don't know. Let's say we 10% of us can be an entrepreneur, but from this 10%, it can multiply more jobs creation, because at the end of the day, we still need workers to run the show. So I think with this in mind, so the focus should be on promoting entrepreneurship, i.e., to focus more on the MSME segments. So this should be the way we should look at it, like in terms of creating more jobs, because the big corporations, I can say that the appetite for a suddenly, you know, a surge in hiring spree, I think is almost a non-existence, because people are very conscious about the cost and the productivity.
All right.
So yeah, COVID is just it's a wake up call.
Yeah. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Fuzin. All right. And then we are moving on to the Q&A box from Chung Hoi Lee. Is investment a solution to inflation? I don't think so. My real question is, will investment accelerate inflation? If yes, should it be encouraged? If no, what happens if majority of people spend most of their time in investment and choose not to spend the time for actual work or labor?
Okay, Holly, thank you for the question. Yeah, I think you're missing the point. I'm not saying that inflation is the solution. Sorry, investment is the solution to inflation. In fact, investment is just part of the solution. When we talk about inflation, like I said, economists have yet to find the solution in totality. We have been, more often than not, we will resort to subsidies. We will resort to price ceiling as a means to control inflation. But have we really been successful? I really doubt it. And therefore, I think we really need to really think about, because those measures, those subsidies, price control, it comes with a cost. Okay, and what we are trying to do is that we are trying to distort the market, whereas the determinations of the market equilibrium is something is very intrigued. No one really knows. If economists will look at the classical economics, whereby there is this, what we call this invisible hands to dictate the prices. Yeah, I think to a large degree, we actually how price is being determined is very mysterious. You know, yes, we try to understand. Okay, there's a cost plus markup. There go your price. But in actual fact, when you go into a market, we really look. It really depends on the consumer taste. You know, the structure of the markets, the technology, how this information be disseminated. So there's a lot of permutation that would actually will determine the level of inflation, i.e. the level of prices. So when I say investment, because we understand, it's a fact that inflation is rising at a rate 2.4%. So if we work hard and we keep our money in our closets, fine. But your money will be eroded by inflation by 2.4% minimum. 2.5% is minimum, because those are the aggregated numbers from the Consumer Price Index. Bear in mind, Consumer Price Index is a survey done by Department of Statistics based on aggregated values of aggregated society in our economy, where in actual fact, every one of us would have our different CPIs. So what I'm trying to say, the CPI could be high, the inflation could be higher than 2.4%, given a certain level of individuals. So therefore, you need, to really to make use of your savings, so that at least it can beat your inflation. So when we know inflation is 2.4, that's the minimum. Then you should decide should I go into fixed deposits, 100%, everything go there, at the current rate, whereby say 1 year FD rate is hovering below 2%. So obviously you are underwater lah, kan? So therefore you need to decide, oh, I need to diversify my portfolio. I cannot be putting everything in FD. I need to put some in perhaps in the fixed income market. If you put fixed income market, MGS yield now, the 10-year yield now yielding about I think about 3.6%. Okay lah, 3.6%. But like I said, 2.4% of inflation rate, that's the minimum. Maybe your own inflation, it could be 5% for all that matter, you know. So maybe you need to venture a little bit more. You go into perhaps unit trust, or a little bit more, even more adventurous, you know, you go into a direct investment in equities. So what I'm trying to say that it's a choice. You can decide, okay, you work hard and you save your money, that's fine, and you keep it everything under your pillow or in your closets. But bear in mind there's inflation that would erode your purchasing power. So you have to decide. It's your own call. There are lots of products out there. Even unit trust, you can see the product offering has been evolving. I can see the offering obviously not just in Malaysia, but it's also open to invest overseas. Even if you look at the EPFs, their strategic asset allocation, 30% has been allocated to investment overseas, and half of their income is derived from the overseas investments. So learning from EPF's experience, we know that taking more risk is a necessity, but it has to be a calculated risk. So I'm not saying that investment is a total solution. It's part of the solutions. So yeah, that's my okay. Then the question is, if majority of people spend most of their time in investment, no. Of course, this can be done. If you are doing actually we can do it on a part-time basis, because now we have technology. You know, you have go and search the stock market guru, those with license, yeah, those who are accredited by the securities commissions. There's a structured way of learning these things, and with the technology you can always learn. But if you don't like to do that, you can always resort to unit trust. Even for Bank Islam Malaysia, through our subsidiaries, BIMB Investment, we have launched an app called BIMB Best Investment Apps, whereby in these apps you can invest as low as 10 ringgit, and you can choose whether you want to do it on your own or you want to allow the machine to decide for you based on your financial goals. Let's say your goals you want to save for your vacation in the next 5 years, or you want to save for your retirement. They will tell you how much you should allocate for investment every month, and this is your target investment. And these are the a set of asset allocation that would help you to reach your financial goals. So there are many ways to do that, but the point that I want to make is that it's not a full-time job, obviously, because we are our day-to-day jobs, but there are ways to help us in terms of how we can try to surpass the inflation rate, and of course we need to put some effort to it.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Moving on to the next question, which I think I myself find it interesting. So it seems like controlling the problem of inflation and manipulating macroeconomy is quite limited to government policy. So what we as individuals can do.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Typically, inflation it seems to be a national issue, and I say national issues, meaning the solution lies with the government. Yes, there are things that the government can do, but there are things that is within our control as citizens. You know, if you, this is where I think financial literacy comes into play. Okay, how to say? First, if you look at the nature of our society, when I look at the macro numbers, Malaysians tend to have high tendency in spending. When I look at figures like marginal propensity to consume, MPC, we are like 0.6. Meaning to say, for every 1 ringgit increase in your income, you will translate it into 60 cents worth of spending, and 40% will be safe lah. So that's how the general setting of our society. We like to spend, which is good. But when it comes to spend, then we need to ask ourselves whether this product or services really suits us well. Is it a necessity? Is it just wants? So what I'm trying to say is that we as a person, as any individual, we are responsible of how we make decisions that will affect our financial well-being. So this is why I think financial literacy is very, very important, and there are a number of ways to look at it. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, but I can share, like, perhaps for a start, having your own accounts of secrets would be a good start, because these secrets, I'm not sure what the full acronyms, but it's a secrets under Bank Negara Malaysia, where you will lay out your whatever your liabilities. From there, you can actually sign up, and I think you can look at you can type e-secret, E-C-C-R-I-S, e-secrets. You look for it, and then they will ask you to register. Basically, it's a one unit under Bank Negara Malaysia. But the point I want to make is that once you have that secrets, then you have a total view. How much is my borrowings or my liabilities? Then you know how to plan yourself. And typically, what I understand, when we do our credit assessment, 60% of debt service ratio seems to be the benchmark. So whatever you do with respect to your borrowings, whether your housing, your car loans, your credit cards, your personal finance, whatever, you must try to make sure that everything falls below 60%. So that way, that will give you some room. Let's say if you want to go into property markets, then you have more space for you to borrow, because you see some good prospect in terms of properties market. So these are the parameters, or rather the measures that could help you to navigate you in terms of how you should manage your finances. So yeah, on one hand, the general problems in relation to inflation lies with the government, but beyond that, I think it's really up to us how we should manage it. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So to the participant that asked, I hope it answers your question. All right, next question. What is your opinion on cryptocurrency as a new investment vehicle? Will it be adopted at national level as what is currently happening in certain countries?
Okay. Yeah, I already anticipated this question. I think there are a few angles that we should look at when we discuss about cryptocurrencies. One, cryptocurrencies as an asset class, meaning when we say asset class, there's equities, bonds, commodities, deposits, money markets, and there's cryptocurrencies. So it's really up to the individuals to decide which portfolio to be inserted in your pool of funds. Yeah, and we can see that cryptocurrencies, there's a lot of variants of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, like Ethereum. But what we understand, at least from me, the volatility is greater. When we say volatility, that means the risk is high. So be careful in considering cryptocurrencies as an investment instrument. That's one. And then, what's the prospect of crypto becoming a legal tender in Malaysia? Because we have seen in certain jurisdictions like El Salvador or certain parts in Latin America. I don't have all the answers on that, but my sense is that there could be some political economics behind those motives, because we know that when we talk about currency markets, US dollar is obviously the most dominant currencies in the world, and because of that, the Uncle Sam countries, they have certain advantages, and for developing countries, because of this, trades, it kind of gives certain disadvantages to them. So perhaps there could be some political economy motives behind the decision to go into cryptocurrencies to be adopted as a legal tender. But my own investigation, but perhaps my own observation or my own survey, and when I have friends in the authorities, I think their main concern is if we were to adopt cryptocurrencies, is the question of tracing the beneficial owners. It will make a task to identify money laundering become more increasingly difficult. Because it's difficult, it's almost impossible to identify the beneficial owners. So it will make the jobs for the authorities difficult. So in that sense, I think whether it will be adopted as legal tender in Malaysia, I think the chances are quite remote, following from that angle. But to cryptocurrency as asset allocation, I think yes. I think there's always a case for that to happen. It is already happening, but need to understand the nature of the volatility in the cryptocurrencies.
All right, thank you. So just now you did mention about high risk investment that you need to be careful. So there's another question from architect Huli Ki. So with inflation rate at average of 2.4%, low risk investment like FD, which is lower than inflation, would it be unwise?
True. That's why I think when I talk about investment, I always look at ETFs as my guidance. If you look at ETFs, their portfolio are quite diverse. Of course, the large chunk of always been in fixed income, and of course equities. But the income driver is not coming from fixed income, which is the money market and the bond market, but it's actually coming from equities. So in that sense, EPF by default is a very, very risk-averse institution. But given the current environment, given the persistence in the low interest rate environment, it has forced them to take conscious decisions to go into a risky investment, to go into equities, to go into private equities, and these are the asset class that they are currently in. So we, as men on the street, I think we can always replicate what EPFs is doing. Of course, fixed deposit, it has low rates at the moment, but it offers you a good deal in terms of managing your liquidity. So you have to remember, you need to manage your own liquidity, because you never know. Suddenly you may need cash in a very short time, and therefore investment in FD will be helpful in order to manage those FDs. Imagine that you have more investment in properties or even in shares, in properties in particular. I think it will take a while for it to liquidate. Although the values has actually increased tremendously, but in order for you to reap all those gains, the process can be lengthy. That could actually leaves you in a very vulnerable situation in respect in your liquidity position. So what I'm trying to say is that in your portfolio, you need to have a very good combinations of assets that gives you enhancement in terms of your asset yield, and at the same time ensuring your liquidity. So these are the common principle that has been used by the pension funds, which I think men on the street, people you and me, can always adopt. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And I hope architect Huliki, I hope that answers your question. And then, okay, another question that I like, anonymous, it's from anonymous attendee. So agree with you view to increase financial literacy among the community. So can you share some reliable resources or reading materials that are suitable for beginners?
Well, I think maybe you should browse through AKPK website because they have all these reading materials on a lot of financial literacy stuff. That's one. The other would be EPFs because EPF, they did a survey they call Belanjawan Belanjawanku, if I'm not mistaken. You can download it, the very brief documents that shows if you are single living in a city center, what should be your minimum expenditure? If you are married couples, no kids, what would be the most reasonable expenditure? So married, no children, married with 2 children, they will tell you what is the appropriate level of expenditure. So these are the guides by the EPFs based on their own survey on their members. So these are the, I would say, EPFs and AKPK will be a good starting point for you to have a better understanding on financial literacy.
All right, great. Okay, there's one question from our chat box. It's quite long. So can you share your views on construction and property outlooks since the office occupancy rates are getting lower, more people may work from home or become entrepreneurs. So as e-commerce is blooming, do you see more logistic buildings and data center coming in? Is Malaysia a favorable location for data center in this region?
Well, I'm quite how to say hopeful that residential property will make a comeback because now we know that because the proliferations of work from home, digitalization in business operations, that shows that you don't need to live in KL city anymore. I mean, for those who can work from home. So I think there could be more demand in terms of outskirts, in terms of residential property. So I'm quite sanguine about property markets, but it may not happen immediately because the income level among Malaysians, like I said, is still vulnerable at the moment. You can see that charts, the salaries and wages has gone down quite dramatically last year. So it will take a while to pick up. But I think we can agree that work from home perhaps could be the new normal, and that could translate into more demand for residential properties outside KL. So on construction, also I'm quite hopeful because I think the sector has been quite in the doldrums for a number of years. And given that the government has set aside or have targeted 400 billion worth of development expenditure, that would mean that the construction sector, especially on infra, would, I think, it will be more likely, especially key infrastructure projects like ECRL, because I always like ECRL because the main selling points of ECRL, the East Coast Rail line, is actually the land bridges between the port, Kuantan port, and the Klang port, so Port Klang. So the land bridges would actually cut short the traveling time in terms of the shipping lines by, if I'm not mistaken, about a day or two, something like that. So that would really reduce the cost of the international trade. And given that our country is very strategically located in terms of the international trade, I think key infrastructures like ECI will be the key catalyst for more buildings along those lines. So I'm quite sanguine on construction. Logistics, yeah, I think it goes without saying because we know that for me, I think I love to watch Star Trek movies where there's technology teleports. So far, it hasn't been invented yet. So in that sense, I think the case for logistics is very much valid. So because of the e-commerce just allow you to transact, to seal the deal. But for transporting the actual goods, we need logistics services. So we need those warehousing and data center to support the whole supply chain. Yeah, favorable location. I think Malaysia is a good place. Well, okay, irrespective of what people say about our state of politics, kan. But I like to think that Malaysia is very peaceful. I think Malaysians are generally a very reasonable people. We are quite adaptive, and our command of English are quite, I would say, quite decent, perhaps. So that could actually the main catalyst for those foreign investors to come in and invest in Malaysia. But for now, I think we have some issues on the political front, which I don't want to go into. But beyond that, I think it's a great place to have in terms of productions hub, FDIs, and whatnot.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. As of now, we have finished all the questions from the Q&A and also chat box. But to all participants, if you still have any question, please write down your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box while we have a little bit of time. Okay, so before that, I have like a very beginner question. So
Go ahead, Kama.
all right, so when do you think one should start in this investment thing?
Well, I think to me, investment is almost compulsory. Because why? Because there's inflation. I think inflation is what you call that? It's colorblind, it's race blind.
True. I mean, it's unpredictable for normal people
right.
like us.
It's very systemic in a way, you know. So we need to manage it as a person. I mean, subsidies, price control, blah blah blah. Those are government stuff. I'm not interested in that. I mean, of course, let them do their job now. But for us as a person, what can we do? You know, of course, one of them is investment. So how early? I think as early as you could. And invest. And another point to note about investment is that when you start to look into investment, without you realizing it, you will encourage you to read a lot, because investments, especially when you talk about financial markets, there's a whole range of factors that can affect the prices of your equities, your bonds, your FX rates and whatnot, and it is quite interesting, you know. And when for me, I also been usually been invited in this class of stock market gurus lah. Most of the time they would ask me to walk them through in terms of what's the economic prospect again. So I can see that there's a lot of newbies in terms of the investment, and believe me, they will ask us some basic questions, which I think is a good thing. It's a good thing that our society is becoming more literate in terms of investment. They start asking questions. I mean, I'm quite surprised now, because I've done it quite several times with a few sessions already. So they start beginning to ask more advanced questions, like what is it that this affect the Federal Reserve decision on rates? You know. So the point I want to make is that people can learn, you know, irrespective of your background. It doesn't have to be someone from economics, someone from finance only to understand about investment. No, it's very universal subject actually. So yeah, I think you can start early, as young as possible, you know.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. All right, so okay, so I mean, we are no longer getting any questions, so maybe we can wrap up, and maybe if you have any advice that, okay, there's one question coming in. It's from Chin Lin Chan. What is banks' willingness to provide loan for property investment and construction companies at the moment? How's the sentiments like?
Okay, Chin, I think banks, banks also is a business. It's a form of business, you know. Of course, but it's a regulated business. We are heavily regulated by Bank Negara. When I say heavily regulated, every aspect of our business, will be scrutinized by banks. Our business plans, our capitalizations, our liquidity, even staffing also to some degree is being monitored by banks. So you can imagine the level of scrutiny by authorities, and therefore inevitably the way we do business, we tend to be more risk averse, especially during this environment. So to answer your question on willingness to provide loan for property and investment, at this juncture, I think mostly the appetite is quite neutral. But I must say also, we can't be like, because we are also a business, we can't be like most of the time neutral, because we have other players that will come into our landscape, our markets, because the barriers has actually come down. I mean, you have to remember, we have these fintech companies, digital bank that will come into foray very soon, that will disrupt our markets. So that inevitably will result banks to take on more risk. So to answer your question, willingness to provide loan properties, I think yes. I think by whatever it is a matter of how good is the locations. Again, the common mantra, location can. And at the same time, of course, your credit enhancement or any form of credit enhancement could actually help to improve your credit scoring. So you have to understand the nature of banks. But beyond banks, I think there are other platforms like if you look at the Securities Commission website, they always talk about equity crowdfunding and whatnot, but perhaps those are applicable for technology companies. But again, to answer your question, I think or not, generally I could say it's quite neutral in terms of banks stand, but those neutral stand may not hold because of competitive forces that could actually force the bank to take on a bit more risk, and therefore it could result more receptive appetite towards this property investment and construction companies going forward.
All right, so hope that answers your question. So I can see there's a participant. All right, okay, another question from Chin Lim Chan. Now that the country is reopened, do you foresee banks' willingness to loan is stronger in next few months or possible tightening?
Yeah. Actually, we are quite happy to see that the government has announced the uplifting of the travel ban, because we know that if you look at the profile in terms of domestic tourism expenditure, in 2019 it was 103 billion. But because of COVID last year, that figure went down from 103 billion to 40 billion. So more than 60% wiped out because of COVID. And perhaps this year also, probably not much different from 2020, probably around 60 billion or so. But when I did some estimates, assuming there's no COVID, that figure should actually be growing around probably this year about 130 billion, next year another 120 billion. So the point I want to make is that if this travel ban, the uplifting of travel ban will continue, meaning my point is that I hope there will be no resurgence of new cases or new Delta variant and whatever again. That could actually help our economy. It will result in more lively economic activities, and therefore banks will be more receptive, because banks, in terms of the financing growth, is very much in line with the state of the economy in terms of the GDP growth. And just to share with you, that 103 billion domestic tourism expenditure, the bulk of it is meant for shopping. That goes in line with the marginal propensity to consume of 0.6, for Malaysia. So we at Bank Islam, when I hear that the decision to allow the interstate travel, so it's a music to our ears, because we know that GDP growth will be accelerated, and therefore the financing growth will actually move in tandem with the level of state of economy.
All right, thank you. So as we are all hoping the economy, the country is going back to normal. So I think it is, our job that we have to remain safe so that the cases are not going high so that we can go back normal so much faster and the economy can get better. All right, another question from Chinlin Chan. I think this will be the last question we take because it's almost 6:30. All right, so if OPR goes lower, possibility of tightening loan approval will become greater?
It's quite likely because typically when the OPR goes lower, it means the economy is not doing well. Yeah, think of it as someone is having a fever and therefore they need Panadol. So the moment you take your Panadol, it means you are sick. So that's the same analogy for when the economy, or rather the OPR goes lower. So it means the economy requires medication. So by extension, the banks become more wary and it become more credit sensitive whenever they assess their customers, their potential customers especially. So let's hope that OPR does not go lower. If it goes up, that means the economy is getting healthy. It's because the economy requires less medication because they can move on their own. So on our side, me and my team, we are forecasting that the OPR will go higher by 25 basis points, perhaps in the second half of next year. So in terms of our GDP projection at the moment, we are looking at GDP growth of 5.3% in 2022 versus 5.3% next year versus 4.2% this year. So that's our base case. This case, we are seeing that the economy is getting better, and therefore there is a chance that OPR will be much higher. And by extension, perhaps our credit underwriting standards, I'm not saying that we are compromising it, but at least we have more confidence to extend more financing to customers.
All right, so there goes our last question. Thank you so much, Doctor. So again, before we finish, we end our event at 6:30. Maybe if you have any simple advice you would give to all the participants before we end this event.
Well, I always regard architects as someone who are very, very learned, right? So we are in a very challenging situation because the proliferations of social media, the information flows are so abundant, and most of the time it's become so overloaded. So I think it's our responsibility to filter those information and always seek truth in order for you to better assess the current environment. Because that's very, very important in terms of how you should motivate yourself. If you continue to succumb to all these negativities, then believe me, it could affect your business. I mean, even for individual basis, it can actually be affected if there's a lot of negativities. So my advice is learn more, filter through all those information.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. So I believe everyone would like to thank you for your sharings for today. And is there any way that maybe they can contact you, or maybe Bank Islam to know more about any of the things?
Sure. You can always email me, Afzanizam@bankislam.com.my.
Right,
just drop me an email.
Yeah, let me just put it in the chat. So just in case anyone needs it, Afzanizam at
bankislam.com.my. And in our website, we regularly will put our reports on economics. So it's free for everyone to download it.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you so much, Doctor. And all right, so before we wrap up, please be informed that don't forget to sign. So there will be a sign out code pop out by the end of the event at 6:30 or maybe earlier. And don't forget to click the link that leads you to a Google form link, fill in the questionnaire form, and that's how you will be able to get the CPD points. So again, thank you so much, Doctor, for very, very beneficial talk. I get a lot beneficial information for today. Thank you so much for your time. And I guess we'll see you around, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you to all participants for joining Time Online Tech Talk. And we'll see you guys again later. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Stay safe, yeah?